to the cloud. Okay, cool. All right, welcome everyone. Today is Monday, July 28th, 2025. Welcome to the Node Lifecycle Working Group weekly meeting. We've got quite a lot on the agenda, so I'll try and speed through this as quick as possible. I'm sure none of you need to be reminded, but the code of conduct applies here, and this is a public meeting that's being recorded, so please keep it PG. With that, let's just jump straight into the agenda if no one has any problem. I added this first item to the agenda. I think we should keep it maybe, which is a welcome to new attendees to this working group. If you're on this call and this is your first time coming to this meeting, first time meeting a working group, and you would like to, please feel free to introduce yourself now, maybe say why you're here and what you're doing up to about 1 minute. I'll give you some silence and then you can come in. Okay, apparently everyone is very familiar with the working group. Okay, that's fine. Cool. Next thing. I think as a few of the leads know, we've been discussing whether Uber as an end user should present to the working group some of the challenges that they face as end users with Node Lifecycle. I spoke to some folks inside the company, what is it today? And they're all very happy to do that next week. So I'm going to pencil that in if everyone's okay with it. So next week during our weekly meeting, they will, show us some of the internal interesting parts and painful parts of Node Lifecycle. Cool. With that, let's move on to eviction requests. Just to jump in here with, I was talking to Philip earlier, and some of the important folks haven't managed to make it today. So what we're thinking is, and please shout if you disagree with me here, is that we will do the we will kind of speed through the important points of eviction request and then pause it for next time, but mostly today focus on checkpoint restore. Is everyone okay with that sort of focus? I will take silence as everyone loves it. Okay, so let's actually, how about this? How about we do checkpoint restore first? Philip, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't mind like, either way.
Go ahead.
Yeah, depends also on the people from checkpoint restore. Like how much time do you think it will take you to go through the topic?
Victoria, Adrian, or someone?
Yeah, I think Adrian will probably, because he has more experience with this topic and has been working for a long time. And Victoria is essentially leading the work with Kubernetes scheduling, and she can also discuss on that.
Okay. Maybe if you would like to start, I'm fine with that. And then if you could just leave maybe 15 minutes for me. So like stopping around at least 45. Is that okay with you guys?
Vicky, do you want to start, I guess?
The floor is yours. Victoria's mic is not working, or Dustin, I think it's going to have to be you.
Yeah, sure. So we have been working on checkpoint restore for a long time, and Adrian has spent a few years trying to convince the Kubernetes community that this is a useful feature. And it started around 2018 with Google presenting essentially how they use checkpoint restore with Borg. And Borg is very similar to Kubernetes in terms of workload management. So over the past, I guess, 2-3 years, we discussed with the Kubernetes community what is the best approach of integrating this functionality. And we ended up with a use case called forensic checkpointing, which simplifies the implementation so that we can focus on the checkpoint side. And with Victoria, we have been recently working on essentially how we can integrate this checkpointing functionality with the Kubernetes scheduler. And she noticed that there is some overlaps between the Node lifecycle management and essentially what we are trying to do. And we recently published a paper on this topic. Vicky, do you want to? I'm not sure if Victoria is still here. I think she just left. But anyway, so the main point is that we extend the Kubernetes scheduler to use preemption so that we can essentially, instead of terminating workloads, we can checkpoint these workloads, and then we can use these checkpoints to resume the workloads on different node. And in this way, we can essentially avoid um, the loss of work. And in the case of Google, they were presenting this as low priority tasks, for example, video encoding for YouTube, that have to be preempted to allow for high priority tasks to be scheduled on the node. And we have similar use case with, for example, AI ML workloads, where, for example, training workloads have to be checkpointed periodically, and for inference workloads, you can reduce the initialization time. Adrian, do you want to add something?
Yes. Hi. Thanks for having us here. So one of the reasons why we wanted to be here is that just give me a second. Okay, I think now my video works. Okay, so one of the reasons we wanted to be here was that we, as Radostin mentioned, we are working on this for a couple of years now in the context of Kubernetes, and we try to get this on more formal and more people involved. So we were also looking at creating a working group. And then Victoria saw that there's also the Node-Lifecycle working group. And one of the very early things we did with Checkpoint Restore was it was implemented as a proof of concept. There's somewhere a pull request still it exists. We implemented kubectl drain -- checkpoint. So basically, when you drain a node, the pods were all written to disk. There was a stateful checkpoint made of all the pods running on the host, and then when you restarted the kubelet, it found those checkpointed pods from the previous drain, and it restarted them. And so this was the point where we thought maybe there is a connection to the work you are doing, and we have been doing a couple of years ago. And so we just wanted to make you aware of the work we do, so that maybe there's something we can work together on. I think this was one of the main points why we wanted to be here. And I don't know, are there any questions to the technology we currently have? How should we proceed here? I don't know if I should just keep on talking, or what's the best way. I don't think just me talking all the time is not helpful.
That's completely fair. I think, first off, does anyone else in the working group have questions thus far about this? I will say myself, I haven't read through all of your documentation yet, but I will do so after this meeting. So it's quite hard for me to have the full context. But Philip, do you have anything, or Peter, or Ryan? Peter, go for it. You look like you're ready to go.
Yeah, well, Philip raised his hand, so I would yield. I have comments, but I don't have questions.
Okay, maybe Philip then should go.
Yeah, I just like quickly read through some of the materials and saw the presentation. But like, could you like simply describe like what is the flow of this feature? Like, what do you have right now, and what do you imagine it to be like in the future?
Okay. So when we brought this to the Kubernetes community after some discussion, we decided for a simple use case, and like Radostin mentioned, this was the forensic container checkpointing. And the idea behind forensic container checkpointing is to be able to create a stateful copy of a running container without interrupting it. So this comes with a couple of API shortcomings in Kubernetes, which is not a shortcoming of the technology but it's just how we integrated it in Kubernetes. So currently, a container will always keep running after it's being checkpointed. This is something which some people who are mainly using it for migration are not totally happy about, but you take the checkpoint and then you can later just remove the container and then restore it somewhere else or on the same host. So that's one of the things, and so it's also currently limited to single containers. We don't checkpoint restore pods, which again is not a technical limitation, but again it was a decision made to have the interface as simple as possible, because it was just easier to implement the primitives on a container level from an API standpoint than on a pod level. So that's currently the limitations in Kubernetes. It's per pod, and the container keeps running. The ideas we are thinking about is, so we definitely want to do this per pod. We have implemented this as a proof of concept 5 years ago, so we know it works. We can checkpoint and restore a pod. The hard part is how to correctly integrate this into the APIs. And one of the things we would like to see in the very far future, in the best case, is some integration probably in the scheduler, I would say, so that if there are resources low on one node, then the scheduler could decide, instead of killing a workload because another one has higher priority, that you just move it somewhere else. So this is the kind of the ideas we would like to see this go, which sounds simple but requires still a lot of work how to correctly integrate it.
Adrian, would it be possible to share my screen just to show something? Essentially, yeah.
Are you having trouble sharing your screen right now? Because I can jump over and see if I can.
It has to be enabled by the host.
Okay. Where is the button to let me do that?
So over the 3 dots over.
Okay. Yep.
Then you can make co-hosts.
Oh, make co-host. Okay. Make co-host, Red Austin. You are now co-host. You can share your screen.
Thank you so much. So this is just a diagram of what Adrian was explaining, but it sort of visualizes the flow of how the checkpointing works. So essentially, checkpointing is implemented as part of the OCA runtime, runC, crun, and then the container runtime, in this case, could be container cryo, is going to call essentially the checkpointing functionality. And this essentially creates a tar file that contains the checkpoint. So this is how essentially it's integrated with Kubernetes. And then at higher level, we have a checkpoint API that can be used to essentially trigger this checkpointing mechanism. And essentially we have, Victoria can speak more about this, I guess, at some point, but this is sort of like a diagram illustrating of how we envision this to be integrated with the scheduler in terms of essentially integrating the checkpointing mechanism with other components and essentially handling the preemption. This is what I want to share, sort of to explain what is the workflow and how it works.
That makes sense. Peter, you had your hand up before me, so maybe if you go and then I'll go.
Yeah, I mean, I just had my feeling on this is I agree that there's a world where the work that we're doing in Node-Lifecycle will intersect with checkpoint restore, but I think both of the efforts need to sort of mature a little bit more. Like, I think on the checkpoint restore side, to get a world where we have preemption, I think we need pod level checkpointing to really be, done in earnest, and maybe even have, some semblance of a work, an API awareness as well. I don't, and given how the initial sort of inauguration of the Node Lifecycle charter went, like I think to begin, we're focusing on the graceful node shutdown piece, which is related to checkpoint. Like in the ideal world, it would be related to checkpoint restore because we wouldn't have to necessarily disrupt the workloads. But to do the MVP of what the node lifecycle working group wants to do, I think we need to like focus on the world where we stop the pods first. So I think that there should be two parallel efforts that eventually converge and find a way to meet in the middle. But like, I don't necessarily know with how young node lifecycle is and what the state of checkpoint restore is that it like makes sense to unify yet.
Yeah, I would agree, Peter. You basically took the words out of my mouth. I think, yeah, it is an interesting effort, and I do think there is value. I just think that at least right now, we are not at maturity level where we have the capacity and complexity budget to take this on, especially since we're still debating things like what does an eviction request look like? How does it actually tie to a graceful node shutdown at all? I think once we've got through that stuff, maybe we should reconsider. But at least right now, I think we need to be quite laser focused. That doesn't mean we don't talk at all, but maybe the coordination is a bit more lighter. Philip, you've got your hand up. Come on in.
Yeah, sure. So, like, yeah, I agree what you said. Like we first need to see what's the expected API of this is going to be, and and to see all the use cases. But I think like the scope is a bit different of this working group and the checkpoint restore. Like in this working group, like we are trying to like bring in APIs that will help like general node and pod lifecycle. Like for example, as like Peter mentioned regarding the pod termination, like because like in your diagram, I saw like you are focusing on the scheduling part, but you have to first start with the pod termination and where you want to like inject your behavior in the pod termination with which the eviction request could help with. But there is like many other areas with pod termination, so like the graceful node shutdown and other points. And so basically, we are trying to propose these new APIs to help, for example, with the pod termination or the node sunsetting. And I would expect like this checkpoint restore feature will be like a one level below like the user of these APIs. So like when you, for example, terminate the pod, there can be like different ways how to achieve like some additional behaviors, and one of these could be like checkpoint restore. But I feel like this is like this would be like an important feature, for example, for the eviction request, and it would be great to have like a close cooperation. And for example, we could add like your use case to our eviction request API, and then we can iterate like what you need and like what we can offer and how we can shape these APIs. Yeah, Victoria, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me now? Okay. So what you just said, Philip, is what I was sort of hoping for, because I know that some like robust checkpoint restore is scattered across many areas, but I specifically noticed, let's say, this eviction request API, and I hope that maybe like we could work together to, let's say, prepare the ground. Maybe in the future, if we have like support for the full pod checkpoint, then there could be some field or I don't know, something in the pod eviction request API that would, let's say, enable like user eventually or someone to ask for checkpoint instead of like termination based eviction. It's like it's about preemption, but that's something I was thinking about. And by contacting your group, I thought that there might be like more people skilled in generally API conventions and how the process goes, and like further Kubernetes architecture that could help us integrate this functionality across maybe multiple, like let's say 6, maybe like API and security here and there properly, so that like we don't have to reinvent the wheel or maybe like break the functionality in the future. So like now that I saw that there is something happening, I thought that maybe we can sort of align or at least try to maybe contribute somewhere or prepare really ground for some future work. So at least I would be personally very happy if we could at least like watch how you create this eviction API and see if we could maybe reuse it or also like be part of it.
That makes sense. Yeah. Ryan, you've had your hand up, so why don't you go ahead?
Sure. I just wanted to add because I think at least the way like when you were talking about this feature, it brought to mind KubeVirt because this is the way I heard it. Essentially, it's like offline pod migration, which is virtual machines go through the same kind of thing where they do live migration. They also do offline migration. So sounds very similar to me. So what I wanted to mention is that KubeVirt's going to have to go through the same thing, and KubeVirt will definitely want to have the same level of integration. So it's something to think about, I think, when talking about it in the context of migration and doing save and restore of these objects. That KubeVirt will probably be have the same use cases as you have here.
I think Adrian, he has been working on API for restoring, essentially introducing the ability to restore pods. Or we have also discussed the migration functionality, and yes, it is very similar to what you mentioned about this use case for KubeVirt. Adrian, do you want to describe the API that you have been working on?
Sorry, I don't know what you exactly mean. Sorry.
The restore API and the pull request for the restore API.
I don't remember doing anything like this. Sorry, I'm completely lost right now.
So we're trying to add the ability in the API server to be able to perform checkpoint and restore because currently
this was just about checkpointing. So now, okay, I know what you mean now. Okay, yeah. So this was just extending the existing. This was just extending the existing kubelet API to the API server. It's just about checkpointing. It's not about restoring. So.
We were also discussing how we can essentially, if we can have a separate API for restoring, because what we currently use is essentially annotation in the container image that allows us to distinguish between a checkpoint and essentially a standard container image. And there have been several users asking if we can essentially provide a mechanism that can directly restore container instead of going through this. I guess this is a longer topic, but providing the same capability for pod migration would be, I guess, related discussion. How essentially how the API would look like to migrate a pod from one node to another. Lucy, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'm thinking, so this is obviously all new context for quite a few of us, and we haven't gone through these docs. I'm wondering if it makes sense maybe to push this to a thread in the WG-Node-Lifecycle Slack group, and then start doing async text communication about this and see what the alignment is, and then sort of go from there. And then that also just gives us the opportunity to really get some context on all of the features you have done. Does that work for you folks from the checkpoint restore side? I can tag you in if you. I think you're all on the Slack, right?
Yeah,
yes.
It works for me. Yes, totally. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I will, after this meeting, I'll tag you all in, and I'll tag all the node lifecycle leads in as well, and we can have a good discussion. Cool. Any final comments on checkpoint restore before looking at eviction requests? I see Philip, Victoria, you have your hands up.
Yeah, I think we can still have some time to discuss this. Like we can move these the questions about the eviction request to like the last 15 minutes or even the next meetings. So yeah, I would like to first discuss like for example, when you mentioned when you're talking of the API, I went a bit through the forensic container checkpointing feature. And I as you said, you added a new endpoint for, I think it was on kubelet. And I think there is a big difference when you talk about APIs in Kubernetes, if it's the first class APIs that most of the users are familiar with, and the endpoint APIs or so this for example do you have users of this checkpointing API, or did you receive any feedback on this feature?
I mean, there have been several people from the community reaching out to us, but it's more like essentially people asking questions, how to do certain things or how to resolve certain issues. But yes, I think it's currently in beta. So it was merged in 2022 as alpha feature, and Adrian can say more about this, I guess, because he works closer with other people.
Yeah. So So one of the reasons why we try to create the working group, why we try to reach out to you, is that there are a lot of people asking how to use it, and we are trying to collect people who are using it. So we know people are using it. People are using it in production, and it's just because with the use case in mind it was created, it's very limited, and so to open it or to make it easier for other use cases besides forensic container checkpointing, that's one of the reasons why we want to talk to more people, why we want to have a working group, why we are also talking to you, is just to be able to reach more people and to have a better understanding what we need to do in the future, how we can integrate it correctly for all or for more use cases. So yes, we know people are using it, and we are trying to figure out a way to move it forward in a way to make it easier for people to use in the future.
Vicky, have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to say something unrelated to this, but I will say something related too. So, one of the use cases how I found out about Checkpoint Restore was because I am an administrator of a large Kubernetes cluster, and we experience this low resource utilization that's quite frequent in other cloud sites as well. And we wanted to use this checkpoint restore functionality to maybe do some magic with the scheduling or just generally experiment with it. And then we found out that it's really not really, but it's complicated to use it the way it is now. And during the time, there have been some attempts to make it easier. Adrian has implemented in the past API support, but that was not really merged. I had one diploma thesis student who also re-implemented it and added also security or a secure encryption of the checkpoints. But that's just a thesis work. But we saw that it's possible and that it has potential and that we can use it really in the production. Then we built a bigger use case of checkpointing and restoring Jupyter notebooks that worked and was fine, but it was a little bit cumbersome due to the way it is implemented right now, because it's not, let's say, Kubernetes native. And I, as an administrator, imagine that this function, not all of this functionality is let's say exposed to the users, because you can do many things with it. Maybe I would keep part of the API only to be set by administrators or something like that. But yes, that's to the use case that yes, it's used. The other thing I had, unrelated to that, but maybe related to the topic of your working group node lifecycle, is just like a theoretical question that if you checkpoint a pod and then restore it, would you keep its original UID or would you make it a new pod? Because I have been asking myself this question, and like according to the documentation, pod's UID is intended to be unique across the whole lifetime of the pod, and like I think that it would be reasonable to retain it. You also keep the owner references, and it is essentially the same object as before, but it's just later in time. And I have some idea about this, but I think that maybe you also have some ideas about this. What would be the best? Would it be just better to mark it as a new object, or is it still the old one?
I think this is a bit of me dodging the question, but I genuinely think I'm actually answering it in a better way. I think that exact same question should be asked at Signode. I think Peter, I assume you would agree with me here that this would probably be a good idea. There's a lot of people who I think would have quite a few opinions on where this sits in the life cycle in regards to pod uniqueness. Philip, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like a bit too technical at this stage. I guess like there are some assumptions about the bots that could hinder keeping the same UID.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think I think
Go
like
for it.
like firstly like we have been working on the node maintenance and action request APIs for quite some time, and I think like the biggest obstacle is like convincing everyone that what you want to do is the correct way for all the users and for the whole community. Like first, like you have to ask the question like if the APIs you want to introduce, if they have to be introduced in core, or if you can introduce them through a CRD, because that's like the second way is much easier to do. So I know you need the kubelet support, so maybe that's not a good idea, and you need the core support. But then like you need to like build like a good set of use cases and like users who would like to use this feature, and yeah, and this will help you to guide like writing the API, and then like we can also talk with the integration with our working group and our features.
There's also,
yeah.
I think it also depends on the use case, because there are people who are using checkpoints for auto-scaling. So for example, when you want to scale the workload, instead of starting from scratch, you can essentially use a checkpointing mechanism. So in this case, maybe it would make sense to use different unique IDs.
Yeah, if I can continue, yeah, I think like this, like if I were you, I would not dive like too many into like these technical details. Like I would first try to like focus on the whole general picture, and like to see like what are the pain points in the community like this would solve, and to basically gather all the use cases and like try to design the API, and then like in the cap you can get like into the technical details, like for example to solve the UID question. And yeah, and like as mentioned before, like I think it would be good if you contacted like the KubeVirt folks who have been doing like this kind of thing for virtual machines, and they are using it already in production, so they might have use cases for this, and they might be interested in having this API as well. And so they might even have users like who have some features like for virtual machines and migration, and then want to move some of their workloads to like strictly to containers, and they might like request similar feature for containers to work. So yeah. Okay. Yes. Lucy or anybody else?
Cool. Yeah. So I'm going to start a thread in Node Lifecycle after this, and then yeah, I think you should. There's a Signode meeting tomorrow. I think you guys should go and discuss the things we said about kubelet, and then try and build consensus and work from there. I think Peter's comment in the chat is also particularly prescient. With that, if everyone's okay, I would like us to move on now to eviction requests, not because that conversation wasn't interesting, but just because of a time management thing. Cool. Or Philip. Okay, cool. I'm going to go for it then. All right, we are okay. Let's move to eviction request API now. So to get everyone up to speed on what happened last time, we introduced the eviction request KEP and went through it as a group. We had some discussions about some of the details, and to the extent that people are here, we can continue those discussions today. Philip, maybe do you want to go first with difference between and possible synchronization of delete and / eviction calls?
Yeah, I will go first. Firstly, just to conclude the last topic. So like once you have like another point for discussions, you can like come to the next meetings or take a look at the eviction request, or like when you are at the point when you have feedback or would like to integrate with or approach the node and the lifecycle. Yeah, so like regarding eviction request, I would like to start with the review I got from Joel, and I think I got this question last time as well, and I think like
I'll throw that on the screen while you talk.
Yeah, it's a pretty big review. Like one of the main points, like Joel pointed out, is like that the API for interceptors is like driven through pod annotations, and it's a bit complicated and like hard to approach like management wise. And if it might be better to basically try to introduce like a first class API in the pod API or in the pod spec, I suppose. And so yeah, I would like to discuss that. And I don't know like if like Peter has any points about extending the pod API, or like what are the problems, or if we should move this more to the SIG-Node meetings.
Sorry, you caught me slightly not paying attention, so I'm catching up all the quick. Yeah, I mean, I think a pod API change, I think if that's eventually what we want, I think we should push for that. It'll extend the lifetime of, take longer to sort of get it together, but I don't necessarily think we should be like scared of a pod API change. If that feels right, like if that feels what we eventually want.
Yeah, I did have my hand up first, but you contributed. So Jesper, why don't you go first?
I can try. Hello, everyone. The first time joining here. So are we talking about actually integrating the eviction request into the pod spec? Or am I misunderstanding something here? Because like to me, the intent that you want to drain something, like that's a one thing. Like there might be many pods. So like, what if you want to go back on that decision to drain that decision? Then you have to update a bunch of pod specs. I'm a little bit unsure how that would actually work in reality. I might be missing context here, but
sorry, maybe I should have introduced this a bit more. So we are not talking about the eviction request, but about the interceptors. So like before eviction request even starts, we can have like a set of interceptors that can introduce a special behavior into the pod lifecycle. So one of these like behaviors, for example, could be even the checkpoint restore. So you could have an interceptor for checkpoint restore, and when the pod gets terminated, you would basically like pick the interceptor with the highest priority and like let it give it a go to, for example, start like copying the data from the container to another one or another node. And so we are tracking these interceptors like currently, and I mean in the KEP, we are tracking these in the pod annotations, and we just track the interceptor class, like to have the identifier of the interceptor and like a priority. And we also have some other metadata, but this is mostly like the ID and the priority. but there is like a bunch of like considerations, like what priority like should the main controller have. Like there are some like additional like validations that we have to do on these interceptors, and we might also have some dependencies between these interceptors. So like this API could even get more complicated into the future, and like because we are using the like pod annotations, there are some limitations. For example, you have limitation on the length of the interceptor class, which if I remember, it's like 63 characters or so. And this might like be limiting in the future and might hinder like the usability of the API and like the evolution of the API. So like what we are I already like we have discussed this in the CAP, and Joe is also proposing it in his review, is that we would like introduce first class field in the pod API, I don't know, called interceptors, and then you could like mutate the pod during the runtime and like add the interceptors there, and like add the also the like each interceptor could add itself to the pod, and it could also see like the priorities of the other interceptors, and yeah, so that's basically it. But like to have like more support for the API evolution, and to have better validation and the length of the fields. So that's are the main reasons. Yeah, Lucy.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I think one of the things that I have a little bit hard time wrapping my head around is like why, like, what are the use cases for having multiple interceptors? Like why would you not always just have a single interceptor?
Yes, so like you could have, for example, yeah, like each pod like can be of interest like to multiple actors. So for example, when you take a pod, it's owned by a replica set that is owned by a deployment, and the deployment can be, for example, like scaled by HPA, horizontal pod autoscaler. And each of these components can have like a specific behavior depending on the setup of the deployment or the HPA, how it should basically terminate the pod, and how it should be, for example, migrated. And like, for example, then you also add like the checkpoint restore to the mix. Like some deployments have this available, like have this option, some don't. And then you also have, for example, an option of adding like a better scheduling, or I mean, like, because when you want to migrate, you first sometimes you have to allocate the resources on a node. So you could have a component which like could basically reserve this capacity. But these are all like theoretical like features that are not present, and we are not pursuing them at the moment. But it's just to show like why we would like to have support for like multiple interceptors.
I have a few comments here, but I think maybe Daniel, do you want to come in? And then I want to get the context clear before I start making comments on this area.
Okay, sure. I just have one example for multiple interceptors. We have implemented something similar internally. And what we do is, for some applications, we want to first spin up a replacement node before evicting the workloads, which means that this is like a generic interceptor that can be added to the pods that need it. And then afterwards, we might have other things like, I don't know, first moving the data to a new replica, like for a database or something like this, or do some more application-specific things before shutting down the pod. So we can have multiple steps that are required to get rid of a pod on a node.
Okay, but like in that setup, like it seems like you're encoding your orchestration into the interceptor logic. Like basically you like your orchestration of migrating between different nodes like are all of a sudden encoded as interrupter priorities essentially. At least the way that we do things at Uber, like that would be one entity that orchestrates from start to end. And that entity would also be responsible for kind of determining whether you can actually reliably do perform that operation given everything else that might be ongoing in the cluster at the same time. So it might just be different kind of ways to do things. But thank you for the context.
Yeah, I think if Daniel, you want to come back in a second, I just want to add to that. Yeah, I think that Daniel's use case is very valid, and I think that from an architecture point of view, we do not presume how users are going to use features of K8s, which is why I also think that multiple interceptors is a must-have here. And we cannot say to people, oh, just one interceptor, work it out. That's too much of an opinion for the core of Kubernetes to have, at least to me. Daniel, sorry, do you want to come back in?
So I can see the point that you might want to have all the logic in one place, but in our case, what we saw is that if we want to support a lot of different applications, it was quite a lot easier to give some generic functions that people can use. Like, for example, the node replacement thing that is spinning up a new node before we are starting evictions is just turned on by an annotation on the node. So onboarding on this thing is quite easy. And then only if your application needs more logic, then there are other things you can attach to the whole system. And I could see interceptors in the same way. Like you can provide some toolings from infrastructure perspective and then let people write their own thing if they need it.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone have any more comments on the whole multiple interceptors thing before we I just want to maybe step back to what we said about before, which was the whole structured, whether we want this in the pod spec. But before I do that, does anyone have any more comments on multiple interceptors?
Yeah, I just want to conclude that we also would like to see I mean, if it's okay to have one interceptor if it's under a single organization, but if you have multiple organizations or components that would like to interact with each other, then it would be useful to have this feature of multiple interceptors.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's maybe step back to what we were mentioning earlier, which is whether interceptors should be annotations or should be part of the pod specification, effectively a first-class API, like Joel was saying. Is he still here? Unfortunately not, but that's fine. One of the things so I agree. I do think that when we build these things, we should aim for first-class APIs. The only thing I'm thinking in my head right now is, do we need that first-class API to launch a V1 Alpha 1? Or can we do annotations in V1 Alpha 1, work with SIG-Node with the intent of we would like to change the pod specification so that you can include eviction request interceptors in there, and then push to that mode in a V1 Alpha 2? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking right now. Any comments on that? Or Philip, go for it.
Yeah, I think the feedback we got from Peter is good enough. That he doesn't see a major issue of introducing this. So I think we should move this to a signal discussion. And I mean, in general, with APIs, you can introduce an alpha field into the pod spec and gate it basically with our feature gate. So
Yeah.
if we see and I think we see the importance of having a first class API, because as I'm basically tiptoeing around the limits of the annotations in the cap, and it's not a nice API to have, and I think having the interceptors as a first class API would be nice to have. Yeah. I mean, other option would be to also define some cluster resource or of interceptor, but to me it seems it should be still tied to the pod. Yeah, I will let you or Ryan
Ryan, maybe you jump in first.
Yeah, I wanted to understand when you say first class API, are we saying that if we were to create some new API and that's supported by the Kubernetes core or whatever, however we want to define it. I mean, is that what we consider to be a first class API as well, or does it mean it has to be on a pod or a node?
I think when we're talking first class API right now, we're saying that we add a new property to core v1.podspec. So it's in core v1 itself. Obviously that requires more, more consensus than just this working group. That requires Node. But that's kind of why I'm saying, like, I think we should do a first iteration, at least with annotations in an alpha 1. I don't think, for example, we need to hold up and wait just to get the core V1 stuff. Sure, for the full release, absolutely, when users are actually using it. But I think we can show a lot and a lot of value in an alpha without that. So I think these are, like, effectively, to me, 2 separate tracks. Track 1, eviction request with just annotations for now, V1 alpha 1 only, feature gate only, not something users really use. Track 2, with SigNode, core v1.podspec, new property, like eviction request interceptors, or however we want to do it. Discuss around what the API should look like in there, etc. But yeah, what do other people think? I think, Philip, you have your hand up here in particular, and you raised it when I was talking, which means I probably made you say something.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I disagree a bit here. Because like when we want to introduce the annotations, we also like try to define a lot of like validation, or like through validating admission policy or admission plugins on the pod itself. And basically we are trying to like define this API already, and we need like a SigNode approval of basically to have like the API working in we would be doing a lot of hoops already, and I'm
Philip, are you cutting out for everyone or just me? Sorry, other folks, it's okay. Philip, you're cutting out.
It's cutting out for me too. Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Is it better?
Yeah, have a go now. I think I got most of what you said, which is that you don't want to ship anything, even in an alpha 1, without the pod spec augmentation. But please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, like as I was saying, like there is already a lot, like we expect a lot of logic to be baked like to the pod admission already, and like to basically have the API compliant with like the behavior of the interceptors we expect. And so basically we need like the SigNode approval of that, and like basically having like set of annotations that will work for us. It might be easier to introduce it in the pod API.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. It's just, like, you know how I said before in this meeting, like, I really want us to be laser focused on execution and showing value. It's another thing it's another blocking step that we have to take before we can show anything. And that's my concern. But Ryan, you've had your hand up for a while, so why don't you come in?
Yeah, I wanted to add on the question I was asking earlier about, because I mean, what about this idea of having an API that's not on the pod? Like I guess we call it a CRD, right? I think that's how we're thinking about it. And I mean, how has that been explored, like as an option here? Like I don't, because I wanted to. I mean, I think we listed off 2 of them, and I didn't hear that one. I just wanted to understand and think through that one as well.
Yeah, I think this is I think it's a bit weird to put an object on that's like not the pod itself, but is targeting the pod, that directly affects the pod's lifecycle. Like, because if we look at other objects, it's like there's not really any that like really directly touch. Like, there's HPA, but that touches deployments itself, and that's also a bit different. This object, if it existed and bound to the pod, would be directly impacting the lifecycle of that object. And in my head, when you do that, if you're part of the lifecycle, you're the object itself. But that's just me.
Okay.
Philip, go ahead.
Maybe.
Oh, sorry, Ryan, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, I understand. I guess like when thinking about this, like some of what comes to mind, like I kind of think of like some of the DRA design in some ways, when thinking about like this idea at a high level, because we're like in kind of at like the construct we're talking about is like we're taking eviction and we want it to be generalized. Like we want almost the user to define what it is, and we want ordering and stuff. So like there's scheduling and there's all this other stuff. And like one of the things that I at least learned from some of the DRA experience is like the doing things in the very general sense is very difficult and runs into a lot of challenges, and then there becomes like all sorts of caveats that have to occur. And so like that's why I wanted to talk about that idea, because I feel like we would have a little bit more flexibility, like when thinking about like that API and how, if we were to sort of take it that angle and talk about an eviction that way, like DRA has multiple CRDs that it brings into play in order to schedule devices, and so that's why I wanted to explore that. As I think that worked well for DRA. Like it didn't, like we didn't specifically go to the pod like to and doing annotations. That's like a kind of what device plugins did, and they needed something a little bit more flexible, and then people wrote plugins around it. So that's kind of what I wanted to go. Like I wanted to see, like, because it just seems very similar to me in terms of like the approach, or it could be very similar to the approach. I wanted to explore that avenue of thinking.
Makes sense. Philip, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Philip,
Yeah,
go for it.
Yeah. I think like you might be right. There might be some advantages. Like I can imagine, like for example, the permissions would be much easier to navigate with this, because you need to give like update rights to a pod for each interceptor. But to me, like the interceptor is already like a plugin, and like we would like introduce like another point of indirection, which could be harder to navigate. And so I guess like we can like add this like to the alternatives in the cap, like to mention like the pros and cons of this, like of having like the real API for the interceptor. And so once like we have this, for example, like in the alternative section, we can then bring it to Signal and also like get their opinion.
Yeah, makes sense. We're at time, so Philip, can you drive taking this to Signode to get just their initial? It doesn't have to be very big, but just like their initial vibe of what they think of this, and then we can go from there. If that works for everyone.
Yeah, sounds great.
Awesome. All right, I'll leave that with you. Awesome. Well, folks, thank you for coming. And if that's everything, I will see you all next week for a presentation almost. All right. Have a good one, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.